Steam still clung to the bathroom mirror when she stepped out of the shower, wrapping the towel around herself like she always did. The sound of running water had stopped, but something else in the room felt louder than usual. My own thoughts. My heart was already racing, even before she noticed the look on my face. It wasn't jealousy that hit me first, it was confusion. Because on the sink, half hidden behind her makeup bag, was something that didn't belong to me, something I had never seen in our house before. Small, ordinary, easy to dismiss if I wanted to lie to myself. But I didn't. She met my eyes, smiled faintly, and said, "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." That was the moment, the quiet one, the one couples talk about later and say, everything changed there. I swallowed and asked the question I'd been rehearsing in my head for weeks. How long has this been going on? Her smile disappeared. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't laugh it off. She didn't pretend to misunderstand. Instead, she tightened the towel around herself and sat on the edge of the bed, like her legs had suddenly forgotten how to hold her up. That's when I knew this wasn't paranoia. This was truth knocking, and I had finally opened the door. We had been married for 8 years, not the dramatic kind of marriage you see in movies. No constant fights, no wild passion either. Just routine, comfort, familiarity, the kind where you stop asking questions because you assume you already know the answers. I worked long hours, she did too. Dinners became quieter, conversations shorter. We still loved each other, or at least that's what we told ourselves. Love had turned into something practical, reliable, predictable. And predictable things don't set off alarms. The first sign had come months ago, though I ignored it then. She started guarding her phone, not obviously, just enough that I noticed, taking calls in the other room, smiling at messages she didn't explain, dressing a little differently, even on days she wasn't going anywhere special. Maybe she's just feeling better about herself, I told myself. That's what denial sounds like when it's trying to be reasonable. Sitting there now, towel clutched at her chest, she finally spoke. "Are you talking about that?" she asked, softly, nodding toward the sink. I nodded once. She closed her eyes, not in anger, in exhaustion. "It didn't start the way you think," she said. "That sentence is dangerous. It's the kind that prepares you for something you already know will hurt." She told me it began as conversation, a colleague, someone who listened, someone who asked how her day really was, not just out of habit, someone who noticed when she was quiet. "No touching," she said quickly, "no crossing lines, at least, not at first." I didn't interrupt. I was afraid if I did, I'd shatter whatever honesty she had left. She explained how loneliness can exist even inside a marriage, how she felt invisible, how every time she tried to talk, I was tired, distracted, or already halfway into tomorrow. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to say I was providing, trying, surviving, but none of that would change how she felt. "What changed?" I asked. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and tears filled her eyes. "The moment I realized I was hiding it," she said. "That's when I knew it wasn't innocent anymore." The room felt smaller, like the walls were inching closer, waiting to hear my response. I thought about all the nights I came home late, all the times I said later instead of now, all the chances I assumed would still be there tomorrow. This wasn't just her confession, it was a mirror. "So what are you saying then?" I asked quietly. "That you're in love?" She shook her head immediately. "No, I don't think so. I think I was in love with being seen." That hurt more than if she'd said someone else's name, because it meant this wasn't about another man replacing me. It was about a version of me she had stopped believing existed. Silence filled the space between us again, thicker than before. The towel slipped slightly, but she didn't adjust it. Modesty felt pointless now. I realized then that trust usually doesn't break with a scream. It breaks with whispers, with small secrets, with moments you convince yourself don't matter. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at a street I'd seen 1,000 times. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know," she said honestly, but I didn't want to lie anymore. I turned back to her, heart heavy, mind racing. That suspicious moment, the one triggered by a tiny detail, opened a door neither of us could close again. Whether we walked through it together or apart, that part was still unwritten. But one thing is clear, the hardest questions aren't the loud ones. They're the quiet ones you finally ask when the truth is already standing in the room with you. I didn't mean to ask it. It slipped out casually, almost harmlessly, like the thousands of questions we'd asked each other over the years, the kind that usually die in the air without consequence. But this one didn't. It landed between us like something fragile shattering on the floor. "Do you still feel close to me?" She froze. Not confused, not surprised. Frozen. That pause, barely 2 seconds long, told me more than any answer ever could. We were sitting at opposite ends of the couch, the TV murmuring in the background, neither of us really watching. It was one of those evenings that look normal from the outside. Dinner eaten, dishes done, day survived. But something had been missing for a long time, and that night I couldn't pretend anymore. I'd noticed the distance growing in quiet ways. Fewer laughs, less eye contact, conversations reduced to schedules and responsibilities. We functioned well, like coworkers managing a shared life. Love hadn't exploded. It had faded, and fading is harder to notice than breaking. She finally spoke, her voice careful. "Why would you ask that?" That was another answer without being one. "I don't know," I said. "It just feels like you're here, but not really with me." She looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers, a habit she only had when she was anxious. That's when I felt it, the shift, the moment when a marriage quietly steps onto unfamiliar ground.
"It's not that simple," she said. Nothing good ever follows that sentence. I leaned back, suddenly unsure if I wanted to hear what came next, because some questions, once answered, can't be taken back. You don't get to unknow the truth. But I had already asked, so I stayed quiet. She told me about the loneliness first. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind that screams. The subtle one. The kind that grows when you feel unseen, even though someone is sitting right next to you. She said she felt like she'd been slowly disappearing from my life, that I listened but didn't hear, that I loved her but out of habit, not curiosity. I wanted to interrupt, to say she was wrong, but I remembered all the time she'd spoken and I'd nodded, already thinking about work, all the evenings I'd chosen my phone over her stories. This wasn't an attack, it was an explanation. Then she mentioned him. Not immediately, not directly. "There's someone at work," she said softly. "He noticed." That was it. That was the line that changed everything. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "Noticed what?" "Me," she said. "When I was quiet, when I was tired, when I felt small." I stared at the wall behind her, afraid that if I looked at her face, I'd see confirmation of something I wasn't ready to accept. "Did you tell him things you stopped telling me?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. That silence was louder than a confession. She insisted nothing physical had happened, no dramatic affair, no hotel rooms or secret nights. But betrayal doesn't always require touch. Sometimes it lives in messages, in shared laughter, in emotional refuge you no longer offer your partner. She admitted she'd started looking forward to those conversations, that she felt lighter after talking to him, that she hid it, not because she planned to leave, but because she didn't want to hurt me. That irony almost made me laugh. "So, how long?" I asked quietly. She inhaled sharply. "Longer than I should have let it go." I nodded slowly, feeling something settle inside me. Not anger, not rage. Clarity. This wasn't a single mistake. It was a series of small choices, made during moments I wasn't paying attention. "I never imagined this," I said. "Not us." "Neither did I," she replied. That's the scariest part. We sat there, two people who knew each other deeply, yet somehow had drifted far apart. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always come from wanting someone else. Sometimes it comes from feeling alone. "What happens now?" I asked. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, real ones, the kind that carry guilt and fear, not manipulation. "I don't know," she said, "but I don't want secrets anymore, even if the truth costs us." That question, the one I almost didn't ask, had stripped our marriage bare. No more assumptions, no more pretending, no more comfort in silence. Whether we rebuilt or walked away, one thing was certain. A simple question had exposed everything we'd been avoiding. And sometimes the truth doesn't arrive to destroy you. It arrives to force you to finally see what's been broken all along. The truth didn't come out in a dramatic argument. There was no shouting, no slammed doors. It came out quietly, on a random evening, when I finally asked a question I should have asked a long time ago. "Is there something you're not telling me?" She looked at me, and in that moment I saw it in her eyes. Not guilt, relief. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the kind of silence between us that had become normal over the years. Once, this table was where we planned trips, argued playfully about movies, and talked until midnight. Now, it was just a place where time passed. She didn't answer right away. She took a slow breath, folded her hands, and said something that made my stomach drop. It started innocently. Those two words were enough to rewind months of memories in my head. She told me it began with conversations. Nothing secret at first. Just someone at work who asked how she was doing, and actually waited for the answer. Someone who remembered small details. Someone who made her feel heard in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. I wanted to believe that innocence had stayed innocent, but deep down, I already knew it hadn't. She explained how those conversations became a routine, how she started sharing things she no longer shared with me, how she laughed more, how she felt lighter. "I didn't plan for it to happen," she said. "I didn't even notice when it crossed the line." That's how it happened, I realized. Not with intention, but with neglect. As she spoke, signs I had ignored lined up clearly in my mind. Her phone always face down, stepping outside to take calls. The way she smiled at messages she didn't explain. How she stopped telling me about her day, but seemed emotionally full somehow. I had noticed all of it. I had chosen not to question it. "Why didn't you stop?" I asked. She looked down, tears filling her eyes. "Because it felt good to matter to someone again. That hurt more than anger ever could. Because it wasn't about desire. It wasn't about replacing me. It was about absence." She admitted that there were moments she should have pulled back, but didn't. That she hid it because she didn't want to face what it meant. That she told herself it was harmless because nothing physical happened. "But I knew," she said quietly. "I knew it wasn't right." I listened, my chest heavy, realizing how many times I had mistaken comfort for connection. How I had assumed love could survive without effort. "I never cheated," she said quickly. "Not in the way people think." I nodded slowly. "But emotionally?" I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That's when it hit me. Marriage doesn't usually end in a single moment of betrayal. It erodes in small, almost invisible ways. Through missed conversations, unasked questions, through assuming your partner will always be there no matter how little attention you give. I wasn't innocent in this story, but neither was she. I ignored the signs I said aloud more to myself than to her, because I thought we were safe. She reached for my hand but stopped halfway, unsure if she still had the right. That hesitation said everything. "What does this mean for us?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "I don't know, but I didn't want our marriage to be built on lies." We sat there, surrounded by years of shared life, suddenly unsure of what any of it meant. The truth had changed the shape of our past. It forced me to see our marriage not as something broken overnight, but something slowly neglected. Later that night, lying awake beside her, I replayed everything. The late nights at work, the way I brushed off her attempts to talk, the comfort I took in routine. I assumed love was permanent. I forgot it needed maintenance. The hidden truth wasn't just what she admitted. It was what I finally understood. That innocence can turn into betrayal when boundaries are ignored. That silence can be just as damaging as betrayal. And that the signs we ignore don't disappear. They wait. Waiting for the moment we're finally brave enough to ask the question that changes everything. The hardest part wasn't discovering the truth. It was deciding what to do after I knew it. Because once the secrets were out, once the excuses were gone, I was left standing in a space I never imagined I'd be in, between forgiveness and goodbye. And there's no map for that place.
Regret has a sound. The house felt different after her confession. Same walls, same furniture, same memories, but the air carried weight now. Every sound felt louder. Every silence felt heavier. She tried to act normal, made dinner, asked if I was tired, talked about work like nothing had happened. I wanted to scream. How can you act like this when everything has changed?
But instead, I stayed quiet, because part of me wanted things to feel normal again, even if it was fake. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling. She slept lightly, turning toward me out of habit. That small movement almost broke me. 8 years of marriage, thousands of shared moments, inside jokes no one else would understand. A life carefully built, brick by brick. Could I really walk away from all of that? But then another question crept in. Could I stay? Forgiveness sounds noble when people talk about it, but no one talks about how heavy it is. How forgiving someone doesn't erase what they did, it asks you to carry it forward without letting it poison everything. I imagined waking up months from now, still wondering who she was texting, still replaying her words, still doubting moments that should have felt safe. That kind of life felt exhausting. The next morning, she finally asked the question we were both avoiding. "Are you going to leave?" Her voice wasn't dramatic, just scared. I looked at her and realized something painful. I didn't know the answer. "I don't know," I said honestly. She nodded, like she had expected that. We talked for hours that day, not arguing, not blaming, just laying everything out, raw and uncomfortable. She apologized, not the defensive kind, the kind that comes with understanding the damage done. She admitted her mistakes without justifying them. "She crossed a line," she said, "even if I didn't want to admit it." I appreciated her honesty, but apologies don't rebuild trust on their own. I admitted my part too, how I'd grown distant, how I stopped listening, how I assumed love could survive on autopilot. This wasn't a courtroom. There was no winner here, just two people realizing they had both failed in different ways. For days, I lived in my head. Every memory felt different now. Our laughter felt fragile. Our arguments felt unfinished. Even our good times felt like they were being questioned. Was she happy then, or just pretending? That question haunted me. People say love is about fighting for each other, but no one warns you that sometimes fighting means knowing when to stop. I asked myself over and over, can I forgive her without resenting her? Because resentment is poison. It doesn't stay contained. It leaks into everything. And I didn't want to become someone bitter. One evening, as we sat quietly, she said something that surprised me. "I'll understand if you leave." That was the first time she said it out loud. "I don't want you to stay just because you're afraid to lose what we had." That's when I realized this wasn't just about my pain. She was afraid too. Afraid of losing me, afraid of starting over, afraid that her mistake had already cost her everything. I stood up and walked outside, letting the cool air hit my face. I needed space to think. Forgiveness would mean starting again, not from where we left off, but from something entirely new, with boundaries, with effort, with honesty that hadn't existed before. Goodbye would mean freedom from doubt, but also from the life we built. Neither choice was easy. Both came with loss. When I went back inside, she looked up at me, searching for my face for answers. I realized then that choosing forgiveness didn't mean pretending nothing happened, and choosing goodbye didn't mean the love was fake. It just meant that sometimes love isn't enough on its own. I took a deep breath. "We need time," I said. "Not promises, not pressure. Time." She nodded, tears in her eyes. That wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't goodbye either. It was the space in between, the place where truth lives, where healing might begin, or where endings quietly take shape. And sometimes, standing between forgiveness and goodbye is the bravest, most honest place you can be.
It started it. Because the hardest part wasn't hearing the truth, it was waking up the next morning and realizing we still had to live with it. The house was too quiet after that night. Not the peaceful kind, the kind where every sound feels like it's intruding. I could hear the clock ticking from the hallway. I could hear her moving around in the kitchen, careful not to make noise, as if silence might protect us from what had already happened. We didn't talk at first, not because we had nothing to say, but because everything we said felt dangerous. Trust doesn't disappear all at once. It cracks, and then it changes shape. I found myself noticing things I never noticed before: how long she stayed on her phone, the tone of her voice when she said certain names, the pauses between words. I hated that version of myself: suspicious, alert, tired. This was the aftermath no one warns you about, the part where the truth follows you everywhere. She tried to make things right. She offered transparency without me asking, shared passwords, explained her schedule, checked in more than before. And still, my chest felt tight. Because trust isn't rebuilt through access. It's rebuilt through time. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's the way someone sighs when they think you can't hear it. The way apologies stop being words and turn into behavior. She carried hers quietly. "I wish I had stopped sooner," she said one night, "before it hurt you." I believed her. That didn't make it easier. Some nights we talked for hours. Other nights we avoided each other, exhausted by emotions we didn't know how to manage. I learned something important in those moments. Healing isn't linear. Some days I felt hopeful, other days I felt foolish for staying. Both feelings were real. I thought about leaving more than I expected, not in anger, but in self-preservation. I imagined a life without doubt, without wondering, without reliving that conversation in my head. But then I imagined a life without her laugh, without our shared memories, with the version of us that still existed, quietly, beneath the damage. Neither future felt complete. One evening, I asked her something that surprised both of us. "Do you think we can become something new?" She didn't answer right away. "I don't think we can go back," she said finally. "But maybe we don't have to." That stayed with me, because going back wasn't an option anymore. Only forward or apart. The decision didn't come in a dramatic moment. It came slowly, in the way we chose honesty over comfort, in the way we faced uncomfortable conversations instead of avoiding them, in the way she owned her mistake without rushing my healing, in the way I allowed myself to feel pain without turning it into punishment. We didn't promise forever. We promised effort. Some people believe love survives everything. I don't believe that anymore. I believe love survives work, awareness, accountability, courage. And sometimes it doesn't survive at all. That doesn't mean it wasn't real. The aftermath changed us. It stripped away assumptions. It exposed weaknesses. It forced us to confront who we were and who we wanted to become. Whether together or apart, that truth would shape both our futures. I still don't know how our story will end. But I know this. The confession was not the ending. The betrayal was not the whole story. And the aftermath, painful, quiet, honest, is where real decisions are made. Not in anger, not in fear, but in the space where regret meets responsibility. And love is tested not by words, but what you choose to do next.